an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this very special edition of ESH News. As you can see, we got the stars above and the stripes below, and we're gonna talk today about, as you can see, we're not in the usual scenery of ESH News. We are here to talk about the 2020 elections and about this guy over here with this guy over here on this side. Hello Moshik, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
Okay, great. For anyone who needs to know, I will enclose my family relation to the man that I brought over here to host at ESH News. Moshik is my uncle. I guess my favorite uncle, because he's my only uncle, but yeah, he's my favorite. And we have a long history of negotiating and talking about all sorts of topics. And from my understanding, the way that he is well known with the American politics, I thought that he was the best man to bring him over here to ESH News. And how are you this evening, Moshik?
Very good. So yes, American politics has always been my hobby. I've been researching it for a while. I spent 2.5 years of my life when I was younger in the United States, in Dallas, Texas. And since then, over the long career, I was fortunate enough to visit the United States many, many times. I once counted it, it's more than 100 times. Traveled all over the continent, met a lot of people from all walks of life, different political opinions, of course, different statuses. And I've been following it also from far away, which is much easier these days because we have all the internet and all the social networks and live TV coming straight from the States. So obviously it's not like being there and feeling what's going on there, but it's close enough to feel the pulse.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about personally, what do you do usually in your personal life regarding like networking and social networks and things like that?
Yeah, so I've been in high tech most of my adult life. I founded several companies, performed some successful exits. Currently, I'm a partner in 2 companies in 2 very distinct areas. One is in the financial markets, a company that develops sophisticated models for fundamental analysis of stocks. And the other one is in the music business, developing a new innovative method for learning how to play the piano. So I guess you can find the 2 more extremes. But it filled my life with a lot of interesting challenges.
Great. But we're to talk about politics. And altogether, I would have to say from my personal experience with you, I would have to grant you I guess the title that you gave me the greatest gift, I guess, in my research life, which was not to believe the media, okay, to the mainstream media. This is what I learned from you. We had several differences in all sorts of other opinions, but this thing actually led me, I know, to choose my way with how to look at media, and especially it kind of like connects to the time that we are talking about now. And maybe if we will remember 4 years ago, we were pretty much tight when Trump offered himself to presidency for the first time, and we had this whole Trump-Hillary campaign going on. So over there, we were kind of like communicating very well with the same opinions. And later on, we kind of like, I had my awakening, and you are keep on supporting mainly the Republicans, if we're talking about the United States, and altogether right-wing opinions. I'm good till now. Like I'm talking honest thing.
Yeah, it's before we move to the media, I'd like to speak a little bit about politics in general. You know,
Yeah.
politics is something that is detested by most people, and for a good reason. But as I told you many times, it's a necessary evil. Someone has to manage the necessities of life, like personal security and the economy. Otherwise, we will go into total chaos. And
Okay.
I heard, I'd like to disprove one of the most common fallacies that people have about, and that is the romantic view of politics and politicians, meaning that they're judging politicians by their qualities, by their moral qualities, which is totally the wrong way to judge politicians. Because I heard actually today, I was listening to the podcast by Ben Shapiro. You know Ben Shapiro?
Of course. Yes.
He's a very, very, very sharp, nice Jewish boy from the States, and his podcasts are always enlightening. So he said, for me, Trump or any other politician for that matter is like the plumber who comes home to open my pipes. I don't care about his hygiene so much. I don't care if he smells or if you can see the crack of his butt, as long as he will end up cleaning the plumbing. And that's what I want for my leader. I'm not looking for him to be my priest and give me some moral authority about how one should behave or how one should speak. I'm judging him by results. Did he fix the plumbing or did he not fix the plumbing? And under this criteria, Trump fixed a lot of plumbing in the United States. We'll get to this later, but
Yes.
just as an example for this matter. And we have the same problem here in Israel. People are looking at their leaders, and if they did something which is a little bit out of line according to their moral authority, they may even they will ignore all the big achievements that they got, and they'll prefer someone who may be a good-for-nothing politician that just behaves nicely. And we don't want to judge politicians by this criteria. We want to judge them by their success to bring results.
Okay. I want
And
to ask you a question at this point, okay, regarding politics. As I well familiar with my fans over here in the ESH News and the guests that I'm bringing over here, usually we bring up politics, and when this subject comes up, everyone are telling me, yeah, politics is fake. You don't believe anything that goes on with it. Now you can take it in a few levels, okay? When you're saying this thing, politics is fake. You can take it to the level that maybe politicians don't follow their promises when they get elected. You can say that politicians don't really represent the people themselves that they're supposed to be that they voted for them. You can tell that maybe the whole election is actually fake. Okay, the whole election process, when the ballots and the votes are not really reflect to the results that we see later on television, or even an opinion that you must maybe holding. I know is that the politicians are not are being taken away the force into making the decisions, and lots of the big decisions that are made inside the country are being made by the deep state, the courthouse, other entities in this country. So when we saying politics is fake, is anything like regarding to you from what I'm saying from the different levels of announcing this thing?
my belief is that politicians are no better and no worse than regular people. They don't have higher or lower standards. They have a lot of constraints they have to work with. But just like you will not expect your friend to be totally fake and tell you all the time wrong things, but you also don't expect him to be 100% right all the time. It's the same thing for politicians, except that because of their visibility, they have to develop a much thicker skin than most people. And because they sometimes cannot keep to their promises, because obviously they made their promises in order to be elected. And I don't see anything wrong with that, because after all, they're going to be re-elected or not as a result of their performance. And that's what will determine, which is totally not the case, by the way, for the deep state that you mentioned. This echelon is actually there for life, and they will stay there whether they make a mistake or not make a mistake. And therefore, they should be loyal servants to the public, to the elected public officials, because the elected public officials, for better or worse, they have a much better chance to represent the will of the people than the officials which are not elected but are nominated. They should basically perform what the elected officials are directing them to do. And if they cannot perform it, or they think this is totally wrong, they always have the option to leave. But they can't disobey, because that will violate the rule number one of democracy, and that is to try to aim as much as possible to the majority of the people. Of course, there should be some checks and balances, and some basic laws that the court have to supervise and make sure that they are not broken. But then again, the court should be following these laws. They cannot make laws of their own, because they were not elected to make laws. And we had a perfect example with the speech of Judge Amy Coney Barrett that was sworn in yesterday. And she said it's not her job to sit and legislate from the court. And this is one of the main differences between Republicans and Democrats in the States, because the Democrats believe that the court's job is to create a better world, and the Republicans believe that this is the job of the Congress, which is elected by the people, and the court just has to make sure that it's actually being enforced, whatever the Congress has decided. In Israel, unfortunately, we're not even to this point of discussion, because the media, going back to the media, and some politicians, which it suits them better because they're in the minority, are totally believing that the court has a way to force a policy, to legislate and to make, not even legislate, just force a policy which overrides specific laws that were approved by the parliament. So this is something that definitely needs to be fixed, and hopefully in the future. But that's our own problem here in Israel.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the United States, and let's talk about elections time. But let's talk about the previous elections that we had in the States in 2016. I am wearing right now my Trump shirt that I guess stole from one convention that they have over here for supporting Trump before these elections. And here in ESH News, we're not PC. We are not want to reflect that we are balanced and fair or whatever. We're supportive. We want to support one side, and it's perfectly fine. There's no reason to apologize about it. And as I said earlier, we went hand in hand with following the last elections that we had, and ever since then, I will tell you personally. I remember the election night, which was amazing, and I remember like the celebrations afterwards. But since then, it looked to me personally, think that Trump, throughout those 4 years that he had, I don't know if he didn't deliver, but he didn't have the same fire or maybe like enthusiasm that we seen in the first elections. Perhaps I'm wrong. Maybe it's just my reflection. Tell me,
you're probably getting fooled by the media.
Perhaps, who knows? But
by the media, so that's where the media's fault is.
Yeah. No, actually, but how do you see those 4 years of Trump?
Yes. So the 4 years of Trump were basically amazing, especially when you're considering all the obstacles and all the grenades they threw in his path. Because let's first talk about what he achieved, and then we'll talk about what were the obstacles that without them he probably could have achieved much more. So what did Trump achieve? So first of all, close and dear to our heart is international relations. And really, sometimes I'm being chided a little bit by my US friends. Why am I interfering with the US election? It's their country, and they're right, of course. But the United States is not just like any other country. The United States has a great effect on any other part of the world, and it has a profound effect on Israel. So from a total self-serving point of view, I'd like the United States to be strong. I'd like the United States to be successful. And I'd like it, of course, to support Israel. So Trump made big stride in all these areas. In the strong part, he rebuilt the military. Before, when he was elected, the military was eroding. There were a lot of airplanes that were not even flying, and they were used for spare parts. During the years of Obama, because of the financial crisis and because of some stupid rules that he did, some deals that he did with the Congress, he said, if you want to cut on some areas which I care about, then I'm going to cut on areas that you'll care about, like the army. So the end result was that the army got really the short end of the stick. And Trump reversed this in a big way. The army is now way stronger than it used to be when he was elected. And, you can translate military might and economic might to political might in the world. On the economical side, he did several things which looked close to impossible to do. He made a huge tax reform, which reduced the taxes and created incentives for companies to come back to the States, companies that went to produce offshores. He reduced regulations in a very big way, which again is a motivator for businesses to start and flourish. And something that was thought as totally imaginary to do, he changed existing trade agreements, which was very unfavorable for the United States. We're talking about the NAFTA agreement, which is the North America Free Trade Agreement with Mexico and Canada, which he changed to a new one called USMCA, which is much more favorable for the United States. He bailed out of the Pacific Agreement, which was not ratified yet, so he could have done this easily. And instead, he went to do bilateral agreements with specific countries that mattered, like Japan. And he is in the middle with some successes, I would say, with trade relations with China. And it's interesting when he talks about it, he said, I don't blame China for the fact that they cheated us so many years on the trade side, because they did what's good for them, and I don't hold them responsible for that. I'm blaming our stupid leaders that let it going on, because they should have taken care of the interests of the United States. And that means that there was a huge trade deficit between the United States and China. It means that there were not enough protection for intellectual property. Interesting to note that the appointment for China that was appointed by Obama was Joe Biden. And he failed in almost every negotiation that he tried to do with China. Maybe has done good for his family and his son, which made some money in China. But as far as the US relations with China, he did nothing. He achieved nothing. And Trump basically cut China at the knees with new tariffs, something that is totally against the common perception of liberal markets. But he did this as a tool, not as a goal by itself, but as a tool in order to bring China to the negotiation table. And right now they're in the middle of a deal. They didn't finish it yet because of all the elections and the coronavirus and all this. So on the economic side, the United States came to the point where it had the results which were way low unemployment, almost the lowest in 50 years. It had the highest number of people working, highest number of jobs in the history. Stock market was booming. And very importantly, also the rise in employment was also uniform for the population which always were behind, like blacks and Hispanics. The unemployment for blacks and Hispanics was also at its lowest ever. And all this made the United States a lot stronger to the point of, another important thing, he went to the European so-called allies that were cheating the United States also with the NATO agreement, and they were not paying their fair shares. And he said, there's a deal here. Everybody has to pay for security, for defense, the same percentage from the GDP. You can't just let the United States pay a much higher share and you will all benefit from this. You need our protection. It's not the other way around. So there was, of course, a lot of moaning and crying in the United States that Trump is going to break all the relations with our allies. But at the end, they conformed and they pitched in and basically saved the United States a lot of money this way. Trump delivered a record number of judges to the district courts. And yesterday, with the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett, he completed 3 nominations of justices for the Supreme Court, which is a record. No other president has managed to do that. Of course, he got helped with the unfortunate death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but still, it happened only a month ago. And to be able to move this process so fast, which is a combination of president and the Senate, to bring a candidate which is totally cannot be dismissed, even by the Democrats. Of course, they dismissed her because they thought the whole process was faulty, but there was nothing faulty about the process. It was totally constitutional. So that matters a lot to many Americans, the fact that now the Supreme Court has a conservative majority.
Let's talk about international relations. I think it's the most major, achievements that he had in this field, right?
So the Middle East, for example, was brought into a big firestorm by Obama because there was a reason for that. Obama was a do-gooder. He thought that he can instill US-style democracy in all the countries in the Middle East and tell them how to run their business. And the result, as we all know, was the Arab Spring, which became the Arab Winter. And we can still see the remnants of it in Syria and Lebanon. Egypt was on the verge of collapse with Morsi. And then, fortunately, the army took over. And we have relatively stable. When Trump came to power, ISIS was occupying an area in Syria and Iraq, which was equivalent to the size of Ohio. Iran was going rampant because Obama cut an outrageous deal with them in which he gave them $150 billion to finance all their terror network in the Middle East. He basically gave them a free pass to develop nuclear weapon within 5 years from today, 10 years from the original deal. And Trump came into power with all this headache in his, and he also confided in the debate that when he went into the White House to do the overlap with Obama, he asked him, what is the biggest problem we have? And he said, North Korea. Because North Korea, at the end of Obama's period, they were doing nuclear tests all the time. And Obama thought that they may be able to launch a nuclear missile at the west coast of the United States. And Trump managed to do all this. He eliminated ISIS. He restrained Iran, which is kind of a contradiction in terms, because people thought that Iran and ISIS are balancing each other. And Trump managed to eliminate both, or not eliminate, but restrain Iran and eliminate ISIS. He managed to encourage, of course, what matters to us, to encourage the moderate Sunni regimes to cut a deal with Israel. And I, for one, foresee that if Trump is reelected, it won't be more than a month before Saudi Arabia will cut a deal with Israel, which is a huge, huge deal. Right now, they're just sitting there waiting to see what will happen. They don't want to do something and then get stuck with Biden. And he managed, he eliminated the Qasem Soleimani from Iran, which was the head of the whole terror network. And without him, it's kind of like the codes were lost and nobody knows where they are. And like somebody dies and he took with him the passwords and nobody knows how to open all this proxy organization that were helping Iran in the Middle East. And he created crippling sanctions on Iran, and he's still doing this. Of course, he has to deal with, again, the European so-called allies that are trying their best to create back relations, trade relations with Iran. But again, if he gets elected, nobody stands a chance if the United States decides that they will not have relations with Iran, because they won't, not the Europeans anyway.
Okay, I want to switch off next on to the next question and switch over to this year of 2020, which was all around it. You can only give it one theme, which is the Corona year. And with this year, instead of talking about the elections all the time, you got the Corona item, COVID item, kind of like getting into the news all the time. And as we saw all over the world, there were like different ways that all kinds of like leaders I know dealt with the question of how to deal with the Corona crisis in their own country. Now, I won't elaborate what we think about this crisis over here in ESH News, but as we saw from when we look at Trump and we look at the other leaders of the world, he took it in a whole other way, okay, with in person, okay, and in implementing all the restrictions and all the things in his own country. Now. And these things, kind of like the big question that they had all through this crisis is why is that different? Okay, why is that Trump took it that way and other leaders took it the other way? For instance, if Trump is like Bibi Netanyahu, and Bibi Netanyahu, it shows that he deals with it all other way, okay, and I don't think it relates to the people. I think it's more related to their personality or something like that.
Not so much, but I see exactly what you mean, and you're right. But we have to understand the United States is different in character than Israel. First of all, it's a federal country. I mean, you have states, and the states have a lot of self-governing powers that the central government, and that's one of the cornerstones of the Republican Party, is that states have a certain degree of independence, and the one word which is or the two words which are like a curse in the Republican vocabulary is federal mandate. When the federal government mandating something over the whole country, over all the states, and they try to do this as little as possible. Sometimes you have to, but they try to do it as little as possible. Republicans believe much more in the close to what your belief is, that there is personal responsibility, that the government is not the nanny of every person, and you have to trust people to execute their personal responsibility. You can't barge into people's house and enforce the rule that there will be no more than 3 people in the house or something like this. This is a no-no. So on that area, Trump is actually taking the more libertarian approach. He also, and to the point he's right, he believes that you will not be able to eliminate the coronavirus until you have the final solution, which is good medication, vaccine, and rapid testing, the holy trio. Now, so what he can do is to mitigate the results, and mitigating the results meaning a much less mortality rate from people who get sick. And we can see this percentage going down from the beginning, from the first days of March, April, where people were dying in a much higher rate from once they got infected. Today, there are protocols that lower the percentage significantly. So that's one thing. And the second thing is Trump believes strongly that the cure cannot be worse than the sickness. So making a complete shutdown of the whole country will kill a lot of people in different ways than the coronavirus. And I'm sure you identify with that. We talked about it in the past.
Yeah.
But again, it's different situation in countries like the East Coast, states like in the East Coast, New York, and or in the West Coast, California, and it's a different situation in the Midwest, where people have different perspective in life, and also it's not as dense as Israel. So I'm not saying by any means that the coronavirus is not a problem, and there's a huge amounts of deaths, and people get infected, and the infection rate is high. And indeed, the Democrats, this is the only tool that they have in the arsenal right now to fight Trump, which is the coronavirus, and they're doing using it in a very, I would say, unfair way to attack him, because if they would be in power, other than a major shutdown, which is total devastation to the country, they wouldn't do anything else. I'm sure they would not rush the developing of the vaccine like the Republicans do, because Democrats, by nature, are much more bureaucratic and much more centrist as far as the government handling, and less private enterprise. So if they were in power during the coronavirus, the results would probably be much worse. But still, when somebody said, you are personally responsible for 220,000 deaths, this is an argument that affects some people, but it's a totally populist argument, because originally all the doctors and the models predicted 2.2 million. So he basically saved 2 million people. So it's kind of the no-win argument. How can you argue with somebody that says so many people died unnecessarily? How do you prove that it was unnecessary? How do you prove that it could have been prevented? If everybody went with masks, would be less people died. So, they look at Europe right now, hit by the second wave. There are places that were hit just as well, and people are wearing masks all the time. So there's really no real knowledge what could have been done to do it better. So
or guidelines to the common leader how to do that.
Right, and it all goes back to my original arguments about politicians. What the Democrats are saying, Trump is not serving personal example because he's not going around with mask all the time. But this is not what he's elected for. He's elected in order to perform the necessary actions to develop a vaccine quickly enough, to create all the necessary protection gear for the medical teams, to make sure that there's enough ventilators, and they did that. They created ventilators like crazy, and now they're exporting to all over the world. In the beginning, they said people will die because they don't have enough ventilators to give them oxygen. Trump also, in the beginning, closed the United States much sooner than his Democrats' adversaries wanted to. He closed the border to China for flights. And of course, everybody in the Democratic side yelled, xenophobic, racist, why does he act against China? But a lot of scientists are saying that because he did this early enough, he saved a lot of lives this way. But if there's any chance that he will lose this election, that will be because of the coronavirus and the amazing, I would say, PR campaign that the media is doing. As Trump is himself frustrated, and he said, you open the TV and all you hear is COVID, 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 COVID. And we have to understand, that the COVID will not be with us forever. It will go away one way or another, whether they develop the vaccine like I believe, or it will die by itself like maybe you believe.
Or maybe everyone will find out it's a lie. But let's
herd immunity. On that there's arguments how many people will die to achieve that. But in any case, it will go away. Okay. Maybe half a year, maybe a year, but we will still have to build economies. We will still have to face terrible adversaries around the world or enemies around the world. And for this, we need a strong leader in the style of Trump. And that's why it's so important that he will be re-elected for the day after.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about other topics which are on hand when we're approaching these elections. Are there any other major topics which are conflicting between the Democrats and the Republicans that actually being treated to by the media or by the ones who are holding the elections? What are the other issues that are on hand?
I think issue number one, and I'm happy to report that on this issue we probably couldn't agree more, is you and I. That is the battle against the political correctness and against the cancel culture. I'm right? There's something.
Yeah.
So
we came from the same point on that one, but I moved a little bit further.
So what we see around the world and in the United States for the extreme is a terrible development, which basically the balance was shaken between free speech and I would call it incitement or race, whatever. All these forms that people say that you are hurting other people by what you're saying. And of course, everybody has his hot buttons that if you talk about them, then he considers it to be a no-no. Like in Israel, we have the Holocaust. You can't make jokes about the Holocaust or display swastikas in the center of the town. People will say that you are, basically it's against the law in Israel. Mm-hmm. But in the States, it was taken to a whole different level, to a whole higher level where I'll give you one simple thing which already caused deaths in the United States, and that is, the movement Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of course, Black Lives Matter. This is not even a question. But in the United States, if you say all lives matter, you're considered a racist. Because you can't say all lives matter because you're basically, according to them, minimizing the black people's problem. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter for them whether the policeman that shot and killed the black youth is black himself. He did this because maybe he was wrong, maybe he was right, maybe he felt threatened, maybe he wasn't. Every case has to be checked on its own, but it may be totally not from racist reasons because he may have been black himself.
I personally think on that matter that the whole concept of racism needs to be redefined, redefined in some way, because I don't think that the racism of what the people are intending today is like related to the historical term of racism, of like just hating other person. I think racism nowadays is about inclusion, about telling about one group that have a certain character and include everyone that is belonging to this group as having this character. And I think that this whole term should be rethought about, and because we are dealing here, and I think that the PC movement, the Democrats are really easy to still relying on the old definition of racism, of like just you just hate other people or something like that, right?
And to a certain degree, there are these phenomena. People are not perfect, and there are a lot of hatred which is unbased and should be scolded. But it comes to real extremes. For example, transgender as another example. And what do you do, with people who, men who define themselves as women, and they decide that because they define themselves as women, even though they totally have all the characteristics of men and the testosterone level of men, they want to compete in the Women Olympic, not in the Men Olympic. Should you allow it or not? It's you and I probably have our opinions, but that's not the problem. The opinions is okay. The problem is we cannot express our opinions, because expressing our opinions right now is becoming a crime. And that's the main problem, because you should be able to state the fact that you don't agree with this policy or you do agree with this policy and still have a healthy debate about it.
Or make a third bathroom, third toilet in your restaurant or something like that.
Yeah, right. That was one of the reasons, as odd as it may sound, it was one of the reasons that Trump was elected, because people had a lot of problems, economic problems, law and order problems toward the end of the Obama era. And people just didn't understand why all this discussion about retrofitting all the toilets in order to have 3 types of bathrooms for the men, for the women, and for those that don't define themselves as either, or for both. And people thought that this is for better or worse, they thought it's a stupid discussion considering the other priorities the nation has. And again, I'm not saying to the subject itself, you can argue both sides of the issue, but the fact is that you're not allowed to have this argument anymore, and that is the problem. This is what makes so many people so sick of the fact that you cannot express your opinion. And it got elevated to social media, which is now looking at itself as the big brother that can censor and throw you out for something totally mundane. I was basically blocked from Facebook for 24 hours for writing to someone in a comment that they are reciting this like parrots. It wasn't a violent remark. It wasn't bullying. It was just, in the height of the discussion, when they kept repeating the same argument, I said, you're reciting it like parrots. And he complained about me. And Facebook has decided that I should be eliminated for 24 hours, not being able to post or comment. And I submitted immediately an appeal. And the appeal was rejected in 5 seconds. And that was it. I don't have anybody to speak to. So that, by the way, connecting to the current elections in the US, is what Facebook and Twitter has done to the major story of Hunter Biden and the Biden corrupt family.
Oh yeah, we're getting to that.
Yeah, but as a result, Congress is going to investigate the CEOs of Facebook and Twitter, if Trump will be reelected. And they're going to implement something that they're really afraid of, because there is famous law right now that Facebook and Twitter and all the social networks, they don't bear any responsibility for what anyone is publishing there. They cannot be sued for something that some other person wrote on their networks. They're just a mediator. And now the government says to, or at least the Republican Party is saying to these companies, you have to choose. If you're going to censor and edit people, then you also have to bear the responsibility, and you can be sued. Or you will be a neutral mediator and you won't do any type of changes, and then you're free. Then if somebody publishes something bad, he can be sued, not you. So that's a major issue on the agenda right now, and it all came from this interesting story of Hunter Biden.
Okay. Moshik, I think I ran out of coffee over here, so we'll take a short break, and we'll be back in about a few minutes, and we'll continue on talking about Biden this time. It will be fun.
Okay.
I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
Hello again, and we're back to the interview with Moshik over here, my dear uncle, and we're here to talk about the 2020 elections. And once it's going to be happening next week, if I know correctly. And tell me, Moshik, at this point, what are the predictions? What are assessments that are going to be regarding these elections? And try to dismiss the word polls. Okay, the word.
Not necessarily, because not all the polls are the same, and it's actually quite interesting. So anybody who's watching the standard polls, the Real Clear Politics average, what everybody's quoting, can come to the foregone conclusion that Biden is winning. It's very different than what you see on the ground in the rallies, the enthusiasm. And there's one very brave pollster. It's a group called Trafalgar Group that they've been in existence for 8 years. And 4 years ago, they predicted the results exactly. They were one of the only polling company that predicted the results. They were mistaken by 2 electors, which at the end that was also fixed. They claim, and it sounds very convincing, that one of the main problems with the standard polls is that the shy Trump voters, the voters of Trump that are not going to tell it to a unknown pollster that calls them. And because there is a very big stigma in the States about Trump voters, because there have been cases where people were fired because of their political opinion. Children were abused because of this. So they will basically either bail out and say they don't want to answer, or they will just say it's Biden. He also claims that a lot of the polls are very long, 30 minutes long, with a lot of questions, and most people don't finish the answering process because they don't really have time or wish to do that in the evening when they're home to be with their family. And that basically biases the group of people who answer, and it leaves the people who are really politically interested, which is not a representing sample of the total population.
They're actually calling people over the phone in their own houses randomly and ask people what they're thinking of.
It's not exactly random.
Like text messages or kind of like internet polls or something like that?
No. Most of the polls are in person. And there's also it's not so random. They basically have divide the public into certain groups, like who they know are registered Democrats, registered Republicans, Black, Hispanics, men, women. They have a whole theory about how to divide. And of course, the predefined division kind of determines the results. So that's another thing. One more thing is that you can't just look at the results, you have to look at the trend. Because if last week the results was -3 Biden, and this week it's -1 Biden, then who knows what it will be next week? It may be +1 Trump. So there's a certain change that occurs, and you have to predict what it will be at the time of the election. Of course, they will say that there are a lot of early voting going on, and that should be taken into account as well.
And quite high rate of rating, if I know correctly, right?
It will be at the end, because there'll also be a lot more votes in general, but there'll be at the end about 1/3 that voted early and 2/3 at the day of the election. That's my prediction. We'll know after.
But it will sum up to the numbers that it always does, or it will sum up to a higher number than usual, the amount of voters?
Mostly because of the coronavirus, and mostly Democrats will vote early because of the predisposition to the corona. That's, it's an estimate. Nobody knows for sure. But one thing we can say, Trump is doing a very different campaign than Biden. He is having now, until the election, about 3 rallies a day, and in 3 different places. And in these rallies, he has somewhere in between 5,000 to 10,000 people in each rally, which is a lot in Corona days. And it's massive rallies with a lot of enthusiasm. People are standing in lines for hours and sometimes for a whole day in order to get into the stadium, and then they have screens outside for people who the overflow couldn't get in. So it's huge crowds that are coming. Yesterday or the day before, there was a big, they call it the Trump train. Thousands and thousands of cars and pickups that gathered in Pennsylvania. People drove in from Ohio and West Virginia, and they all went on Interstate 70 in a caravan of thousands and thousands of cars. unorganized by the Trump campaign. It was all grassroots organization. People found each other on Facebook, and that's how it came about. Don't know if you heard, there was a rally of Jews for Trump in New York the other day that created a lot of violence from the outside. But that very unusual in a place like New York, which is so Democrat and anti-Trump usually. In contrast, Biden, for various reasons, he justifies it because of the coronavirus, of course. He holds very few events, and the events are very sparse with people. He basically closed himself for 5 days without going out in the house before the debate that happened last Thursday, which we'll talk about the debate in a minute. And after the debate, he went back into the house, and tomorrow he's supposed to come and do like 3 stops in 5 days. So very different approach.
It also reminds the previous elections, right? I remember also like the Hillary Clinton campaign was really, I don't want to say lame, but it was really, short-handed if you compare to the Trump campaign last election, right?
The thing with Hillary Clinton was even worse because when she did go, she went to the places where she was sure to win anyway, like New York and California, where there's no chance that a Republican will win ever, I think. And she went to these places rather than going to the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, where she should have fought hard. But it wasn't the areas that he felt comfortable about, with all the deplorables. So she preferred to be where she feels good, with the Hollywood stars and with the elite in New York and Massachusetts. So that was the problem then. Now he just he sends Obama to give rallies instead of him. People are saying, we're not voting for Obama, you are the one we want to vote for, so we need to see you. And when he does appear, he does a lot of faux pas, gaffes, as they call them. The other day, he was videotaped saying that he and Obama have developed the most intensive voter fraud organization. And, it's on record. It's recorded. He probably meant to say fraud prevention. And so Biden is definitely, what's going for him is that he is a likable person. Yeah. He was in Washington for 47 years. He flashes his smile, and he is one of you. He came from the working class. That's what he's selling, But people know that he's a politician, and he's been a politician for 47 years. In the first debate, Trump gave him he said, I did in 47 months more than you did in 47 years. And in this debate that happened last week, Trump scored a significant victory. He came to the debate in a totally different frame of mind than the first debate. The first debate, if you recall, was very contentious. People were yelling at each other. Nobody could understand what they're saying. Chris Wallace got upset at them, mostly at Trump. Trump was hoping maybe that he will cause Biden to collapse, but that didn't happen. He was prepped enough. I don't know, maybe he took a couple of pills to keep him going. And he managed to cross the debates and come to the finish line. That, from his point of view, that was a victory. So Trump drew his lessons. That's one thing you can say for Trump. He may not show it, but he learns fast. And he learned quickly that he cannot use the same attitude in the second debate. The audience that he aimed mostly in the second debate was what they call the suburban housewives. A population that he managed to get quite good results in 2016, but since then, this population doesn't like feuds, doesn't like quarrels, doesn't like yelling. They want to see somebody more civilized. So he came in a much more even-tempered mood, and he addressed them with. He was firm, but he was not aggressive. Mm-hmm. that definitely changed the mind of many. The second goal that he came with was to expose some of the lies that Biden is saying, and there are plenty of them. You can't trust the fact checkers to do that because they'll always go after Trump. They'll never go after Biden. But yet, Biden said some really blatant lies that everybody that listens can know, whether it is about Obamacare, that nobody lost their doctor because of that. Maybe it's because the fact that he never took any money, and we'll come to this thing with his son in a minute. He said that he never called Trump xenophobic and racist when he closed the borders for the coronavirus, which he did, and it's on record. It's on Twitter. And the most outrageous thing that he did that came back to bite him in the week after was the fact that he basically said that he's going to transition out of the oil industry and going to renewable energy. Now, this may be a very popular message in California and in New York, but it's very unpopular in Pennsylvania and in Ohio and in Michigan and Wisconsin, which are the states that he cares most. Now, he did this. I don't know if he believes in this so much, but he's so much a hostage with the left-wing radical point of his party, what is called AOC +3, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which is this young, very progressive member of Congress from New York, and the two Muslims, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, and another one, Presley. And they basically, this AOC +3, the squad, they're actually bending the Democrat Party, which had a very grand tradition, into very far left areas. You know, they gone so left, they left America. And he said this in order to appease them. But the end result was that people were shattered. You know, this we're talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs in Pennsylvania in the energy sector that are going to go down the drain. And these people are totally having a second thoughts now about whether to vote for Biden or not. And that was one outcome from the debate.
I want to talk a little bit about Biden itself, about his character, and I will dive into the sludge head first. Okay, I remember like that before the previous elections. I actually came over and showed you all those horrible pictures that you see Biden sniffing those little girls' heads or touching them really inappropriately. And this whole thing kind of like it dazzles me that this whole thing doesn't being used with the Trump campaigns, and doesn't even mention in this campaign of this what I'm seeing in those images, and I probably know that most of our viewers seen these images of Biden doing horrible stuff and doing things which are really unacceptable to any kind of human being, okay, regular human being, to be seen. And how did he get away with that? That it's not being even mentioned in this election. These things.
It's going back to the media. You know,
Yeah.
the media could have leveraged it to the point that he wouldn't be able to show his face in the street. But if the media doesn't want to do it, then it won't happen. And, you know, it started with the media, and that's where it, comes back to it. The media decided that they want Biden to be elected, at least temporarily, because no doubt that if he gets elected, he won't complete 4 years in office. There'll be President Kamala Harris, God forbid. And so they want him no matter what. And that means that all these terrible, terrible movies, which, you cannot deny them, they don't come on air. And, if it was Trump doing, 10th of this, it would be broadcast nonstop in all the networks. But
I remember they grabbed the day, that was before the first elections. It was like a Memorial Day that they kind of like discovered in the media. They keep repeating it. So why doesn't Trump brings it up? Okay, with his own campaign.
Trump, I think, knows that he fighting the moral battle is not his forte. He has his own, videos from the past. If you recall, before the last election, they brought this famous off the record conversation he had with someone. I don't forget his name. That he spoke very rudely about women. And when I heard this talk, in his own voice, I thought, that's it. He's done. He's toast. He's going to have to withdraw. Nobody can survive after something like this, but he did. And that's because it's Trump. He has a real strong skin, thick skin. Now, it's an enigma to me as well. How come somebody with this record of hideous behavior toward girls can continue to run? Of course, they justify it as he's just a nice old man with amiability toward every human being, especially young girls. But it doesn't fly with me. I see it as very ugly, especially when you see the girls really uncomfortable and to the point of disgust when he's doing this. This for me should be a total disqualifier. But again,
I think it's also like colliding with the whole Me Too movement and
right,
the whole
right.
values that the Democratic Party is actually trying to bring up all the time. It's kind of like colliding with each other. So I can't see it like existing in any way. And I saw this show that he came over to kind of like, I don't know if apologizing. I don't think he did that. The show with Whoopi Goldberg and the other woman. He came over and I don't think he apologized over in this show. He just said that he didn't really understand what it's all about or something like that, right?
It's more than that. There's a woman named Tara Reid who basically, in her name, and she used to work for him as an intern when he started as a senator, and she said that he sexually molested her, and she identified in her name, and she tells the whole story. And you remember what they did to poor Judge Kavanaugh and Justice Kavanaugh when they confirmed him. They brought from him stories from his high school days about a party that was a little drunk, and some woman complained that he pushed her on the bed. And they were, teenagers. And here you're talking about a senator, a U.S. senator, that she tells the whole story how he molested her, and when she didn't accept his approaches, he fired her. She basically had to leave, and it just goes, without any repercussions, which is terrible. But let's talk about what really is hitting the waves these days, and that's the story of Hunter Biden. So if you don't know all the facts, no wonder, because nobody's reporting it. But just because nobody's reporting it, except a couple of, we say, righteous people in sodomy, the New York Post and Fox News, everybody else is suppressing the story, not for a good reason, because we already have evidence and we already have personal witness. So the story goes like this. During the period that Joe Biden was the vice president of the United States, his son got a free pass to arrange for himself all kinds of lucrative deals. It's a known fact that when Biden was appointed to be the point man for China, one of these missions that didn't achieve anything that Obama has sent him, he took with him on Air Force Two Hunter Biden. There's a picture of them going off the airplane together. So he took him with him. And surprisingly, a week after they came back to the States, Hunter Biden got a lucrative partnership with a Chinese hedge fund to manage 1.5 billion with a B dollars. And of course, that creates a lot of management fees for the partners. And he had no experience to do this type of deal. The only thing that he had was access. He could peddle the influence of his father. Then was the issue with Ukraine. Ukraine was collapsing at the time. There was the fight between the pro-Russian group and the pro-European group, Yanukovych and later on Petroshenko. And again, Biden was the point man for Ukraine. Biden was the strong man of Ukraine. He basically controlled the money flow, so he could call the shots there in Ukraine. And one of the major gas company of Ukraine, its name is Burisma, and they were the owner of the company was an oligarch, which was connected to the pro-Russian regime, and the Ukrainian government was investigating this Burisma company. Hunter Biden, surprisingly, without any background in energy, without knowing any language other than English, with very little business background, was appointed to be a director in Burisma with a fee that was something between $50,000 to $100,000 a month. And he became a director. And soon after, the prosecutor in Ukraine was investigating Burisma. His name was Viktor Shokin. And Biden, we know all this because Biden bragged about it a couple of years later in video, and we have the video, that Biden said that he went to Ukraine and he told the Petroshenko that Shokin has to be fired today. And Petroshenko told him, and he said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. I have to sign on a $1 billion loan guarantee for the United States to Ukraine. And if he is not fired by the time I leave, then I'm not signing it. And he bragged about it, and he said, and Petroshenko told me, but it's not your decision, it's President Obama's decision. So I told him, call him. And he said, son of a bitch, the guy was fired in 6 hours. And that's the guy that was actually investigating the company that gave the lucrative deal to his son. So very, very shaky, all this matter. Now, it was investigated by the Senate in the past, but there was no clear evidence. The evidence came about because Hunter Biden was also a crack addict and had a lot of other vices that we know about by now because the whole videos are all distributed freely in China right now. He, about a year and a half ago, went and gave his MacBook computer for fixing in a store in Delaware, a Mac shop. And being a crack addict, he forgot it there. He didn't come to pick it up. After 90 days, it became the property of the owner of the store because he couldn't reach him on the phone or something. So he started to poke around and see what's in there, and he saw some information that really scared him. They went to the FBI. And in December, the FBI agents came. They signed him on some documents, and he has the documents that the FBI took the computer. And that's another question. How come the FBI didn't do anything with it? Because it was about this time where there was the impeachment hearing for Trump in the House of Representatives, and this information could be information that exonerate Trump.
It's like reminds you of the whole smashing hammer cell phone of Hillary Clinton or something like that, right?
Exactly. But here, the FBI ignored this evidence in front of them that could have had great effect on the impeachment trial. Now, after a while, this seller, who happens to be, a Trump supporter, got upset that he didn't hear the FBI do anything with the information he gave them. And of course, he kept a backup copy of the disk. So I called a lawyer that happens to be the lawyer of Rudy Giuliani, and he gave him the material, which he gave to Giuliani. And, Giuliani and his Steve Bannon weaponized it. Basically, if one thing Steve Bannon knows to do is to weaponize information. So he took it and basically released it about 2 weeks ago through the New York Post, which did its own due diligence. New York Post is not a tabloid. I mean, they call it a tabloid, but it's the fourth largest circulation in the nation.
Yeah, but did they agree to publish it, although it's like damaging their own candidate?
No, the New York Post, not the New York Times.
Oh, not the New York Times. Okay.
New York Post is pro-Trump. It's a more a more populist paper than the New York Times. New York Times wouldn't touch it, but he didn't believe that they will. That's why he went to the New York Post. The New York Post does his own due diligence because they don't want to run into a major lawsuit. So they're checking it very, very carefully to see that it's really valid, and then they published it. And the only one that picked the story up was Fox News. And so it welcomed
Surprisingly.
Fox News, and it's showed in the New York Post. Now, it went to social network, and that was the amazing part, because Twitter and Facebook have decided that if someone is publishing the link to the New York Post, the fourth largest circulation paper in the nation, this is fake news, and their job is to prevent it. They blocked the Twitter account of the New York Post. New York Post cannot tweet from October 14th, which means 13 days they were not tweeting, because Twitter,
They were wanted to publish it in some way, over in.
of course, they have their own website, and you can go to their website and see. But Twitter is a major dissemination tool these days. Now, they after there was an outroar, they decided to allow it going forward, but they demanded that the New York Post will delete its previous tweets that are now proven to be true. But they wanted them to delete it, otherwise they will not open their account. And it's outrageous. And because of this, the media today, social media is buzzing with this story all the time. I mean, you can read about it everywhere. They can't stop it. It's like a big wave, and everybody knows it. And you see amazing things. Like there's a quote from the Washington Post that said, "We don't have any knowledge whether the information on Hunter Biden's computer is Russian disinformation, but we will treat it as Russian disinformation." And NPR, National Public Radio, which is supposed to be the objective media outlet, answered one of the people that asked them, "Why are you not talking about this story at all?" He said, "We don't want to waste your time with something which is obviously a distraction." No, they totally changed their job from being an honest broker between events and the people to a censor. And that's really betraying the whole free press thing. I mean, they can publish it and bring opposite opinion and let the public decide, but they will not even publish the facts themselves. Now, what obviously, again, I said when I said Bannon and Giuliani weaponizing it, after for 3 or 4 days, or a week, it was denied that not denied. They didn't say, by the way, to this day, Biden didn't say that this is the information on the laptop is not real. He doesn't. He doesn't say it's not Biden's laptop. He doesn't say it's not his son's laptop. He just say it's all smear campaign. It's all Russian disinformation. But he doesn't speak to the point themselves, to the evidence itself. So after a week, they pulled out a witness, a guy named Tony Babolinsky. He is a retired Navy pilot that went into business, and he was the partner of Hunter Biden. And he says that after Biden left the vice presidency, when he became a private citizen, he was very much involved in a deal that Hunter Biden has cut with a Chinese company called CEFC, energy company. And Biden, the father, was very much involved. He said, "I met with him and we discussed the terms," totally in contrary to what Biden himself said. And they found in the computer a paper that discusses the division of percentages between the partners. And one of the sentences there says, H to hold for the big guy. H is Hunter, and the big guy, you can guess who it is. There's also corroboration that the big guy refers to Biden. So the whole thing is, people are saying now, when it comes to China, China is a very hot button with most Americans today. They're considered to be the biggest adversary that the United States has. And they say if Biden is cutting deals with China, then he will basically forgo the national interest of the United States. He will not be hard on China like Trump is. And that's why
I guess it's pretty sensitive. Also, with comparing it to the Clintons when they said that they sold uranium to Russia and all things like that. They're kind of sensitive about. I know. Giving the essence of Americans to other countries, it's kind of like a sensitive issue, I guess, with any country. I want to move a little bit forward with with the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Okay, can you elaborate a little bit about what is the situation of these parties nowadays regarding the politicians over there, and which kind of like I say entities or groups or movements are they being assisted with this campaign?
Yeah, so very two different situations. The Republican Party today is more unified than it's ever been, which doesn't mean that there aren't a dissenting group. They call them the Never Trumpers. It was like this in the previous election, but they were much stronger in the previous election. Today's polls are showing that Trump enjoys 93% approval rate within the Republicans, which is huge compared to previous leaders. And people like him because of the success. No telling what will happen if you lose the election. It can all fall apart because there are very different factions within the party. The elite, all the people of the National Review that are very hawks on the foreign relations area, but they are much more moderate on economy and stuff like that. And there are the libertarians, which are, the libertarians, this is a whole different frame of thinking, closer to your thinking in a way. And Trump brought under the big tent, the big coalition, he brought also the people from the Midwest, the farmers and the production facilities workers, because he brought the jobs back to the States. And that's what brought them back to the Republicans. That's how he won the election in 2016. Hopefully this one too. But what will happen the day after Trump? It depends who will be the leader and will we be able to unify them again. We try not to think about it because it can happen sooner than we think, and we don't want to think about it this way. We want to hope that he will have 4 more years. The Democrats is even in a worse situation because the Democrats, because of the whole cancel culture that we discussed earlier, the moderate Democrats, the Henry Jackson Democrats from time in the past, they're afraid. They're totally afraid to open their mouth and to speak, because they're being totally controlled by the progressive left. This old bitter guy, Bernie Sanders, who ran until the bitter end against Biden, but at the end is already 80 years old, and he promised that he will run again next time.
I think it's like better off that for Republicans, it's better off that Biden was chosen instead of Bernie Sanders. I think it will be a harder stone to tackle with his enthusiasm or his, like, let's say, clean background or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, Sanders. If Sanders would run, it would be a totally different situation because he cannot con the people like Biden cons some people about him being relatively moderate. But on the other hand, you would have a much more base enthusiasm because Biden doesn't create enthusiasm with a base. They see him only as a vehicle to get back into the White House, and then they'll obviously put the 25th Amendment of the Constitution and find him incapable to continue to serve, and Harris will come instead, which will be terrible. So the situation with the Democrat Party is very unclear.
Tell me a little bit about the Antifa and other movements that are kind of like involved with this whole thing.
Very important. It kind of was sidetracked mostly because of COVID, but the issue of law and order is very, very big on Americans' mind these days. And it may not be shown that much because it doesn't appear on the media as much because the media suppresses it, but it's definitely on people's mind. So what happened was, because of some unfortunate events of black people getting shot or killed otherwise by policemen, it created a lot of unrest and riots. And two wrongs don't make it right. Obviously everybody should condemn a situation of an innocent person getting killed by policemen. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. On the other hand, the life of a policeman in the United States is very dangerous and unsafe as well, and they're dying also in the dozens. So it's not so easy to be a policeman either. But the response to these events are really outrageous on their own. During the month of June, July, August, most of the Democrat cities, and you can see an example last night in Philadelphia as well, are being burned down. The center of the town is being burned down, and it's overflowing to the suburbs as well. And people don't feel safe in their own home. They will definitely not put a Trump sign on the backyard when the rioters are going in the street, because then you won't have a window intact in the house. And people are carjacked in some places.
By this movement, by the people of this movement specifically, the Antifa?
The Antifa is a much more organized movement, but it's also, Antifa are coming at nights, the rioters coming at days. I mean, the protesters are coming in the daytime. And then at night comes the rioters and the looters and the burners and the Antifa people, which mobilize across the United States. But they mostly come to Democrat cities because, as you know, in the United States, the police is actually being run from City Hall, from the mayor. And the mayor wants to be reelected. So in order to be reelected, he can't be too tough on the rioters, which is kind of a contradiction. And there were situations, in Seattle a couple of months ago, the rioters basically confiscated a big part of the city center, and they created an independent state there that policemen couldn't get in. And at one point, Trump said to the governor, I'm going to send the National Guard. But, you can't do that in the States without the invitation of the governor. And the governor and the mayor don't want the federal forces to come, because then it will hurt them with their electorate. So they will forbid him to come. And at one point, he came. I don't know what was the arrangement that was allowed according to, and they cleared the city center in 3 hours. But another outrageous response is the movement to defund the police. The people from the left, like AOC plus 3, they are pushing for defunding the police. Who needs police? Who needs jails? Let's all live in nice anarchy. And they will take the money from the police and move it to social services. Social services is important, but it's not a replacement to a police. And the result is total anarchy in some of the cities. And Trump was playing this card for a while. He doesn't emphasize it too much in the last rallies, not because it's not important, because there are other things that he was probably directed to push more, like the economy. But it's definitely on people's mind. And they may say that they're voting for Biden, but deep within, when they stand in the ballot box, they know that with Biden, the situation will just get worse and worse, and there won't be law and won't be order.
Yeah, I want to touch this question, and we are approaching to the end of the show, and I want to, usually on ESH News, we are talking about really grim things and grim predictions about things that is going to happen, and I'm asking the guests to sum it up with an optimistic view or something like that. But in this show, I guess that we will. I want to go to the pessimistic or like the grim vision of you of what will happen if Biden will be elected. Okay, what this war is going to be affected of, how it's going to be affected the United States, how it's going to be affecting Israel in that sense, and why is that so terrible?
It will be worse than Obama, which it's not a very high level by itself.
It is a high level of force.
Yeah, because if Biden gets elected, the United States is going to go toward the socialist economy, a lot of government interference, a lot of bureaucracy, high taxes, high regulation. Companies will run away again, less jobs, more unemployment, more crime. There'll be huge celebration in Iran. All the bad guys are going to be very happy. Erdogan's Turkey, Iran, Russia, China, they're all going to be extremely happy if Trump isn't elected again. The dumb Europeans will probably be happy too, but they don't really understand that it will hurt them because Russia is going to eat their lunch. And we will be very upset in Israel, except the people that want to see the fall of Bibi, that for them it's wonderful news. And the people in the moderate Arab countries will be very upset. They're really rooting for Trump in the United Arab Emirates and in Saudi Arabia and in Egypt. They want him to be re-elected.
Do you think our peace agreements are on question if Biden will be elected? The recent peace agreements?
It will be slowed down. There'll be much less incentive to go fast. I don't think there'll be any more, but the ones that were already signed, they won't move as fast. You know, people kind of underestimate the impact the United States did on this agreement, including the last one that was signed with Sudan. It would never have happened without the United States. They went to great lengths to get Sudan out of the terror-supporting countries, and that was almost a precondition for them to sign normalization with Israel. All the economic agreements that we have now with the UAE and Bahrain are achieved because the United States is stepping in, sending the Secretary of Treasury, Mnuchin, or as we call him in Israel, Menuchin, to be part of the negotiation between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. I mean, if you think about it, why would they send such a high-level official to do that? Because it's important for them to set these agreements, to give the incentives for these agreements to happen. Like, for example, talking about a pipeline that will lead Saudi oil directly from Yanbu on the Red Sea directly to Europe through Israel. And that will save tons of money for instead of shipping it, through the Suez Canal and stuff. So this is,
grim prediction.
Major projects that the U.S. is involved and supporting, because for them it's a way to basically cartel Russia, compete with the Nord Stream pipe that Russia wants to do to Germany. That was Germany, which basically gets protected by U.S. Army against Russia, went to sign a major strategic deal with Russia on the gas, and Trump said to them, why are you doing it with Russia? Do it with Israel. Get the gas out of Leviathan, and we will finance the pipe, And on one hand, we're guarding you against Russia, and then you go and give them so much money. Why? So obviously, Putin will be very happy if Trump is not elected. And but after this, I mean, when I think that Biden gets elected, I won't sleep the whole night. So.
Okay, I guess we just have to wait and see. I think that we will approach to the end of this show. We kind of stretched it over the time that we planned. But in this occasion, I want to thank you very much, Moshik, for joining me over here with this show. Although I know it's not your home territory or something like that, here on ESH News, I can see, I know your enthusiasm of coming over here, and I appreciate it a lot. Any last words for our fans over here?
I give you a solemn promise that if Trump wins, I'll be happy to come again and analyze the results of the election.
All right, all right. It's a good promise. Great. Moshik, thank you very much again. And from me and Nir and the ESH News viewers, thanks a lot and have a good evening. And we'll be back again. Hopefully, if trouble, we will get back in again to you.
Hopefully. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye-bye.
And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the U.S.